We often hear the claim that Maori are overrepresented in New Zealand's prison population. This argument seems straightforward at first glance. Maori appear to make up a disproportionate percentage of those incarcerated compared to their head count in the general population. But digging deeper, I found that the reality is not what we've been led to believe. The key issue is that the category of Maori is based on self-identification. This leads to a fundamental question. Why do so many prisoners identify as Maori, and in a system that they say works against them? Why would someone voluntarily claim an identity that supposedly brings more hardship? Well, in New Zealand, ethnicity is determined by self-identification, whether you're filling in a census form or being processed through the criminal justice system. When a person enters prison, they are asked to declare their ethnicity, and many choose to identify as Maori. But what does that actually mean? There is no formal verification of ancestry, cultural practice, or community recognition in this process. Someone can declare themselves Maori regardless of how closely connected they are to Maori culture or ancestry. In fact, individuals with no ancestral link at all can still check the box to identify as Maori. Others may do so without significant knowledge of Maori customs or traditions. This reliance on self-identification complicates any analysis of overrepresentation because the definition of Maori is fluid, it's personal, and not based on a fixed or verifiable standard. When people claim Maori people are overrepresented in the prisons, they compare the self-identified Maori population in the prison with the self-identified Maori population in the general public. This leads to another question. How do we know how many Maori people there are in the general population? Well, that information comes from the census. The New Zealand census data also records ethnicity based on self-identification. According to the most recent census data, around 17.1% of New Zealand's population self-identify as Maori. Now that's the base population used for comparison when determining overrepresentation. And there's also no external verification of what constitutes Maori identity in the census. In the last census, there was concern that up to 10% of people who identify as Maori did not file a census return, and there's long been concerns that remote areas populated by Maori identifying people do not return accurate census data. Scientific population projections tell us that New Zealanders who have an ancestral link to a pre-colonial native of Polynesian race is much higher than the census data says it is. The census gives a general population of 17.1%, when in fact the number of people with an ancestral link is a bare minimum of 25% and could be as high as 50%. This means the ostensible overrepresentation metric is either wildly inaccurate or is representative of an undefined sample. Without a clear definition of what qualifies someone as Maori, it's impossible to assess whether the prison system is overpopulated by that specific ethnic group. Instead, we are left with a statistic based on self-identification, which does not necessarily correlate with ancestry, culture, or community affiliation. Some argue that the ostensible overrepresentation is because Maori identifying people are more likely to suffer socio-economic disadvantages that lead to criminal offending. But this just gives rise to more questions. Why in the census do so many economically disadvantaged people identify as Maori, and why do so few socio-economically advantaged people identify as Maori? Ultimately, without a concrete definition of what it means to be a Maori for statistical purposes, we cannot accurately assess ethnic overrepresentation in prisons, let alone explain it. If Maori is defined as a descendant of a pre-colonial native Polynesian indigenous to the territory that became New Zealand, then it is simply not known whether Maori are overrepresented in the prison population. The claim is not proven. It's more likely, based on a population projection model and what we know about genealogy, that there is no overrepresentation at all of descendants of pre-colonial natives in the prison population. Ironically, we've gone full circle. The 1970s era of expanding the meaning of Maori has made the meaning of Maori so broad that it is returned to its original meaning prior to colonialism. Maori now simply means an ordinary person. It distinguishes a being who is alive in the here and now from a tupuna who lives in the spirit world. So millions of our taxpayer dollars have been spent doing research and developing special programs to tell us that the prison population is overrepresented by people who are alive. Which begs the question, are those activists who claim Maori are overrepresented in the prison population implicitly advocating for the return of the death penalty? Thanks for watching. Give us a like, would you, and subscribe to see new content as it drops. See you next time.